Okay, I think we are in business here. It is on. We switched the batteries successfully. Three of us.
They just died. They just died now. They were working perfectly until this moment.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, I'm Michael Robbins, assistant professor in the MFA program. And before tonight's reading with Quaney, we are going to take a few moments to introduce our annual awards for the fiction and poetry students in the MFA program for creative writing. I will announce the poetry awards, no laughter back there. Before giving over the podium to Dr. Watson, who will announce the fiction award and then introduce our featured reader. Tonight's awards are an opportunity to acknowledge and honor the achievement of the creative efforts in the MFA program at McNeese State. It perhaps goes without saying that our MFA students are doing amazing work. They have chosen a path that not many understand, writing and rewriting over days and weeks and years these sentences and paragraphs, these phrases and individual lines with the hope of connecting with an unknown reader, finding expression of some essential element of what it means to be human. The subjective nature of awards and prizes cannot be overstated. Let me note, for instance, that although the exact same poems were submitted for our two poetry prizes, the results are not the same. And I appreciate the comment from one of our judges who, along with her selection, wrote, "Here's where I landed." If you ask that same judge to review the same submission 6 months or a year from now, she very likely would land somewhere else. I mention this maybe as consolation, but also as a reminder. If you submitted fiction or poetry and your name is not announced this evening, remember that truly, this too is the literary life. Use it as affirmation that you are a writer, an artist, and absolutely, you and your work are important. And if you do receive an award this evening, by all means celebrate, but we all must come back to these essential questions. How will I spend tomorrow? What will I do next to feed my creative life? Not when we're listening to a reader or having drinks, which is important, but when it's the community of you and the page. All the literature so far that makes us who we are, and all the literature yet to be made. With these things in mind, let's honor and celebrate our achievements before looking toward achievements to come. The Joy Scantlebury Prize was established to honor the memory of Joy Scantlebury, one of the first graduates in poetry from the MFA program at McNeese State University. This year's judge is Sarah Wainscott, McNeese Review contributor, an author of Insecurity System, published by Persia Books, and winner of the 2019 Lexi Radinsky First Prize book, as well as The Star Cabins, which was chosen in 2024 the Open Reading Selection for Rescue Press. I think it's worth noting, and this echoes the challenge of the writing life, that Sarah is an incredibly talented and delightful poet who put in the work and kept at it, submitting the second book 37 times over a period of 6 years before it was accepted. For the Joy Scantleberry Prize, we have 3 selections. We have third, second, and first, each receiving $50, $75, and $100 respectively. When I call your name, please stand for recognition. All of our prizes this evening were only recently finalized, and we will have checks for you all very soon. For her third selection, Sarah Wainscott chose the group of poems submitted by Leah Joseph. For her second selection, Sarah chose the group of poems submitted by Gwyneth Wheat. And for her first selection, Sarah Wainscott wrote the following. These poems are strange and unflinching, demonstrating how poems can move us between fear and sadness and humor. There's wildness here. A love poem ends in a 2-headed snake. A body's components cavort in a swimming pool. But ultimately, there's celebration of the quotidian moments that make life messy and weird and wonderful. Congratulations to the 2025 Joy Scantleberry Award recipient, Robbie Hess. And there is but one recipient for the Poetry Award named after John Wood, who founded and directed the McNeese MFA program for more than 25 years. And in my short tenure at McNeese, I have come to anticipate a phrase that speaks volumes, the John Wood legacy. This year's selection was made by Carol and David Wood, family of John Wood. The recipient of this award joins a distinguished list of previous winners and receives $500. The poet selected for the 2025 John Wood Award, whose poems should be noted for their conflicted engagement with place and the chronicling of intimacies with family and strangers alike, is Leah Joseph. So congratulations again to all of our poets, and please welcome Dr. Watson.
Welcome. Welcome. Okay, I am now going to announce the Robert Owen Butler Award, but I wanted to read the comment he said about this work first. And I don't know Robert Owen Butler personally, and I know some of you do, but many of you don't. But I think many of us in this room know that he loves one particular word that starts with a Y. So I'm just going to leave a blank space, and we're going to fill in that word when I get there. Robert Owen Butler said about this work, is a fine original voice full of resonance, yearning, resonant yearning. And I wanted to add a few of my own words. This recipient is probably one of the most ambitious and driven, not just students, but human beings that I know, and a pretty darn good writer. And congratulations to Karis McCollum and her Peoplemen of the House. She's at a band concert.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Okay, nobody tell her. Nobody tell her. We'll figure out something.
You don't have to be here together.
Okay. Before we get to our main actor, Kent Quaney, I wanted to kick off this reading with a poem by Angela Ball. Angela is a poet at the University of Southern Mississippi, where Kent and Kevin and I attended, and we know Angela well and love Angela. And I thought that this would be a nice way to start out a really cold evening to think about something we're looking forward to. Spring. My feelings just took a turn for the better while thinking of white flowers turning into strawberries, of clover turning into bees, of crowds of wisteria swelling and swelling. People often think I have a friendly dog, but it is just me. my wide arm span for folding tablecloths, my feet that seem warm, not just by me, but many. I had this feeling once before when I was walking through rain and wet leaves in shoes that were red and navy. Much of me hadn't been tried out, and I liked that. Thank you all for coming tonight to hear Quaney read. I'd like to thank all of those who made this possible. This is made possible by a Juliet Partner Endowed Professorship and all of the support of our faculty. Thank you to Interim Dean Dr. Lejeune, Chair of the English Department, Rita Costello. And when Lee Upton was here, I made a great mistake and I forgot to thank Mike Horner. So thank you, Mike Horner. We keep our visiting writers pretty busy. Kent has conference with students and has 9 more conferences tomorrow. We got to hear a craft discussion today, but tonight is the highlight. We get to hear him read his fiction. And a short introduction for Kent. Kent Quaney is an assistant professor of English and the coordinator of the creative writing program at Auburn University of Montgomery. He earned his PhD in fiction writing from the University of Southern Mississippi in 2014. Quaney's stories appear in journals such as the Los Angeles Review, Literally Stories, Polari, River's Edge, Chelsea Station, Bull, and Boudin. His first novel, One Breath from Drowning, was published by the University of Wisconsin Press in 2022 and won the Brody Award for Fiction. Well, welcome, Kent Quaney.
Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? Okay. All right, thanks everybody for being, I'm glad I got to see you guys get your awards. That's amazing, that's really awesome. Congratulations to all of you, and even to the absent, is it Karis? Karis. Yeah, I'll be meeting her tomorrow, sculptor.
She's working.
Okay, all right. It's so funny, as Lynn was reading the bio, I'm like, oh shit, it was 2022, I better get busy, right? So, but I am working on, a second novel right now, which is, like everyone's like, don't write a sequel, you don't do literary sequels. I'm like, no, I'm writing a sequel, that's what I felt, so it's happening. So I'm working on the second novel, and I'm gonna read from the first novel, and then I'll read a little snippet of what's happening. Give me the grace of it being a shitty first draft, right? with that, as we all appreciate that. And then I'll also read a couple of the things that I recently had published. I recently started writing CNF, which I have never done before. Well, maybe like once. I was like, oh no, I don't know about that. But my faculty at Auburn, a couple semesters ago, they're like, so you're gonna teach the CNF workshop? I was like, what? Well, who else? You know, there's no, okay. So I taught it, and what teaching it made me want to do was write it. So I ended up taking a CNF workshop myself after that when I was doing research in Sydney. Again, I go to Sydney a lot, and the book's set in Sydney, and we can talk about Sydney. But so I started writing some pieces, and I kind of found a groove with it. So I'm working on a lot of CNF right now as well, so I'll hit some of that. But so first, I'll start off with. I keep feeling like I'm going in and out. Are we? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll start with the novel. And I'll tell you, unless you want me to read the whole thing, I'm just going to tell you, I'll give you a little bit of background. I know some of you read it, but so, and I talked about it a little bit earlier today, but the novel is set in Sydney, Australia, and I wrote it after spending several years there. I did my MFA, well, I did an MA and then an MFA down there in Sydney. I was like, I didn't want to leave after the MA, so I figured out a way to stay. I even actually did, weirdly, like, one really ill-advised PhD semester down there. I was like, oh, that's not working, so we got out. But, this is about, it's about a guy from America going to grad school in Sydney. Like, I didn't reach very far, but it's a different, it's a different character, it's a different take on things. The young man that is one of the protagonists of the story, he is a former Mormon, which I am also, and that's discussed in the book a lot. And but he's not in creative writing school. He's in acting school. He's at the National Conservatory, the birthplace of all, Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe and all these people went to that famous acting school. So I was like, why not play with that? So, and another thing that is happening in the novel is that he's been a devout Mormon, but has been struggling with being a closeted gay man while he's been a devout Mormon. And on the plane to Sydney, he basically makes the decision that like when he gets off the plane in Sydney, he's out. He's like, the past is gone, he's not in Utah, he's not in America, he literally reinvents himself basically in the airport. So that's what we gather, like there's not a scene of him doing that, right? So that's the context, and he's fallen into a relationship that is, we'll see. So and I'll start there. So I'll read a bit from a few chapters, and then we'll go on with some other stuff. But so this is from the first chapter. I'm gonna take my glasses off because these are like the long distance glasses, and I don't have the reading glasses, so this is better for me. Also, I'm just getting over the flu and COVID. Promise I'm not contagious. It's been a few weeks. But my voice is a little loud, so if I start to like choke and get a little raspy, like somebody do the drink some water thing at me, okay? All right, I'll start. So this is chapter 1 of One Breath from Drowning. The thumping grew louder, a deep rhythmic pounding, rattling the headboard against the wall. He lay on the bed, frustrated, nearing panic, dripping in sweat. "Shut up," Ryan shouted at the empty room. It'd been going on for at least an hour now, shaking the bed frame, vibrating his spine, and jarring his shoulder blades, picking up speed like a washer going into a spin cycle. "It's just a bread-making machine," Sam had said that first night. "Chinese bakery downstairs. It only goes for a couple of hours. You'll get used to it." But it had been 3 months now, and it still drove him crazy. Starting up at 2 in the morning like clockwork, not ending until 3, sometimes 4, banging, thumping. He tried to get to bed by midnight so he would be in deep sleep by the time it started, but it still woke him up half the time even then. And on the nights he didn't beat it, disaster. Sam, of course, could sleep right through it. One of the lucky ones who could nod off anywhere, snoring away while Ryan cursed the night. He tried a couple of Sam's sleeping pills once and slept through, yes, but woken up with a hangover worse than any night out of the pub could bring on. Nothing could be done now but wait it out and try not to freak out about tomorrow. First day back at school. First day of auditions for every production that semester. Crucial to be at his best. He'd even kicked Sam out of the flat that night, pushed him out the door to go clubbing, hoping for some time to focus and prepare and get some sleep. But here he lay again, miserable, not even able to wake Sam up to commiserate. His heart thumped in sync with the banging of the bread monster, racing as he grew more annoyed. He threw the sheets back and got out of bed, the wood floor blissfully cool to his bare feet. By shutting the windows to keep out the street noise, he boxed in the brutal February heat. Summer in Sydney, merciless, and they didn't have aircon, as the Aussies called it. Sam had just ordered 2 fancy reverse cycle units that were already a couple of days late, with deepest apologies. In the meantime, they roasted. He padded over to the window and turned the crank slowly, carefully, avoiding the fresh paint around the pristine beveled glass Sam had rescued from a teardown in Summer Hill. They had finished painting yesterday, but in this humidity, the surface couldn't possibly be dry. He stood back as far as he could from the frame, cranking impatiently, the window tilting open millimeter by slow millimeter toward the street. The flat was Sam's baby, a gorgeous corner unit in a Federation sandstone with views of Rushcutter's Bay. He'd been rehabbing it for the last year or so, a design junkie's dream, but a dream situated smack in the middle of Sydney's old red light district. And as much as there was talk of the neighborhood transitioning, King's Cross still clung to its shady past with mongrel's teeth. The new array of award-winning restaurants, galleries, and cafes grudgingly shared Darlinghurst Road with a sketchy collection of leftover strip joints, porn shops, and youth hostels. At first he liked the buzz of the neighborhood, the seediness, the edge. He'd even convinced himself that the patch of bay he could see from the lounge room windows meant he was still beachside. But after his first week there with the strip in full swing every night, he figured he may as well have hung a hammock between the pool tables at the all-night pub next door with its never-ending crowd of screeching drunk British backpackers. "You're an idiot," Katrina had told him as he shoved his suitcases and laptop into the boot of the Uber in front of the rambling old Bondi flat he shared with her, the beach spread out before him in full summer glory. Walking away from all this for the crash bang at the cross? But he and Sam had been in drooling stupid love, and it had seemed like the right thing to do. Impulsive, sure, but as scared of this new life as he still often was, it felt like this might be the real thing. And to be fair, the flat was honestly gorgeous. Sam had a real knack for the work, so of course, Ryan posted carefully curated pictures all over social media highlighting the features of the architecture, the views, everything shot from the perfect angle, but just the architecture. The fact of his relationship with Sam, the fact of his sexuality at all, both were still fiercely guarded secrets. Questions from back home were fielded with casual vagueness: roommate, friend of a friend, work done on the loft for lowered rent. He even talked up the added bonus of it being walking distance to the Mormon chapel on Hyde Park. But he hadn't entered that building, or any Mormon chapel at all, since his first weekend in Sydney, when he'd gone to sacrament meeting, jet-lagged and emotional, nervous at what he knew he was about to do, but awakening to a sense of unbridled freedom that complete anonymity in a new country would give him. As he left the service, he realized he'd only gone in to say goodbye. He would tell her, eventually, but as long as he was here and they were there, it just seemed easier to keep things separate. Months had gone by, a year, and he'd stopped thinking about it. He would manage it before he went back home, that is, if he ever did. He leaned out the window further, arms down, still mindful of the paint, trying to catch a breeze. Down the block, drivers gunned their motors in the bumper-to-bumper night traffic, edging past neon nightclub signs, honking at drunks and hookers in the street, shouts and laughter floating up from the patio of the pub. Eyes closed, he let the breeze drift over him and admitted defeat. He should have just given in to Sam's teasing and cajoling and gotten in the cab. Rest and focus had been the whole point, but he insisted, and here he was paying for it. Hot, irritated, panicked. He and Lucy had rehearsed their monologues together all summer, and anything less than perfection was unacceptable. Third and final year of his MFA, and he had yet to nab a lead role. Sure, lots of encouragement, supporting roles here and there, Lucky and Waiting for Godot, Mitch and Streetcar, but he needed to crack into the top, or what was the use of coming all the way down here from Utah in the first place? A siren shrieked from somewhere up the road, followed by a distorted, amplified voice through a police megaphone, ordering someone to pull over. He whispered the opening lines of Vanya's speech, sending them out to the traffic and chaos below, wallowing in the rush of farmer's regret and never asking Elena to marry him, the smash of beer bottles against the pavement punctuating each word. The character took hold, and his voice grew louder, rising and falling as he stepped back from the window, stomping back and forth across the bedroom in his underwear, expressing the regret of a life not lived, of a love not acted on. Imaginary applause rang in his head. He bowed slightly, then walked to the kitchen while running vocal exercises, kneeing and bowing, humming and shouting. The veg plate, oh, sorry, I can't read this. He turned on the kettle for a cup of hot water. The veg plate's coming. He turned on the kettle for a cup of hot water with lemon and eyed the dreary steamed veg plate he'd left on the table before bed. Calorie cutting. Had to look as lean and fit as possible when his instructors saw him on stage. The kettle bubbled and hissed, and he dug into Chekhov again, energized, finding more depth in the words, more pain. He picked a limp stalk of asparagus from the plate, chewed quickly, and swallowed the cold mess. It was good he had sent Sam out after all. Only 3 months in, but he found himself needing a night off more and more lately. Adjustment period, he told himself. A matter of time before they settled into a mutually agreeable routine. Work and study took a lot out of him, while Sam seemed to have boundless energy, always up for fun, for a night out with mates, and always hot for sex. It was intoxicating, even mind-blowing in its newness, but it could be exhausting. The house had felt blissfully empty tonight until the bread banger had started in. Stop, focus, back to work. He walked back through the bedroom and leaned out the window again, hands on sill, paint sticking to his palms, and launched into Richard III at the top of his lungs. Oh, I have passed a miserable night so full of ugly sights, of ghastly dreams, he shouted to the street. Shut the hell up, you bloody wanker, someone yelled over the roar of the pub. The smell of smoking beef and sausage hit him from the kebab cart below. Steamed veggie plate be damned, he was starving. At least the Cross had all-night takeaway. He grabbed his jeans from where he'd left them on the kitchen floor, pulled on a threadbare South Sydney Rabbitohs t-shirt, kicked on his flip-flops, and jogged down the stairs 2 at a time. The rhythmic thump of the bread machine still vibrating through the recently installed Tasmanian oak banister, another of Sam's salvage finds, another installation nightmare. A crash of sounds on the street, music, shouting, clinking bottles and glasses, fragrant eucalyptus branches heavy with fairy lights hung over the wooden fence of the pub patio, giving the sidewalk a pale glow. Drunken zombies milled about, smoking and chatting, while taxis lined down the block, their motors idling, waiting for fares. Fucking brilliant, a chubby girl in a miniskirt yelled. She and her much skinnier friend leaned against the rough brick wall of the gallery across the street. It's bloody brilliant. Pubs don't close here, ever. And it's dead hot in the middle of bloody February. I'm never going back to Manchester. I know, right? The other girl squealed. She grabbed her friend's arm and pulled her into a twirl. And the beach is on your doorstep, right? We're staying forever. Ryan waved at them and they burst into fits of giggles. evening girls, he remembered his own first weeks here, shocked and seduced by the decadent ease of it all. It had been so simple, revelatory. He turned to face the bakery window, give them their moment. Through a half-open curtain at the back, a young Asian girl, maybe 15, pulled a metal handle back and forth over a bathtub-sized steel vat. Oblivious to the party in the street, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, sweat-drenched, t-shirt stretched tight against straining back muscles. "I hate you," he whispered. Stop there. So, the night goes on. How many times spoiling can I do? It doesn't matter. It's the first chapter. So anyway, Sam gets home and he's brought a friend with the intention of the night getting a lot more interesting. Ryan's not up for it. The Mormon prudery kicks in. And he's like, "Goodness gracious, what are you asking me to do?" And he ends up. It's a disaster. He flees, and this is kind of the start of their relationship having a breakdown. So, as you remember from that first little bit, he's auditioning for all the parts. This is his last semester, his last year in his MFA. He's got to nail it, and now he's been up all night. And he spent the night at a friend's because his boyfriend sprung a three-way on him without any advance warning. And so here's his audition scene. This is how well this goes. All right. So this is mere hours later. Okay. Look at me. Whatever I'm gonna get, I've had, and damn near all that's been lost. Oh, actually, I should do that in an Australian accent. I should do that because he's actually trying to do it in the story. All my friends in Australia, every time I try to do it in an Australian accent, they tell me, "Please God, don't ever do that again." Like, this is terrible, but it actually suits the writing. So, all right. Look at me. Whatever I'm gonna get, I've had, and damn near all that's been lost. Ryan drew out the word lost, made it rich, deep, resonant. You can bear it when you lose money and furniture. You can take it when you lose your looks, your teeth, your youth. He leaned into the words, the intonation not quite as he'd rehearsed. His voice a bit wobbly, higher pitched than it should be. Am I capable of this? He took a deep breath and propped himself up further, leaning forward, his eyes focused on the ceiling. But Jesus Christ, when your family goes, good God, Ryan, stop there, please. Ryan looked down from the makeshift hospital bed he'd fashioned out of a row of classroom chairs to see Graham frowning and waving his clipboard at him from his seat in the front row. Shit, not now. He was at the best moment in the monologue. One breath before that wonderful, brilliant moment when his character, the dissolute patriarch of Tim Winton's Cloud Street, having cut off all the fingers on one hand, having lost his wife, declares himself useless, declares all hope lost. Please just let me get that far. He even taped his fingers down with some dusty old gauze bandages he found in Katrina's cupboard and dripped them with a bit of pomegranate juice for blood seepage. Keep going, grab the moment. He took a deep, gut-filling breath and picked up the line. It's more than a man can... I said, stop, Ryan. His teacher's voice was abrupt, annoyed. Enough. He stopped, face burning, a moment of controlled breathing, then grabbed onto a wobbly chair back and hoisted himself up. In the semi-darkness of the theater, his classmates huddled in groups of 2 and 3, frozen, waiting for his fate to be decided, for judgment to be called. Graham held a silencing finger up while he continued scribbling on his clipboard. That it had been a rough day was an understatement. He managed to catch up on some sleep at Katrina's, but he was still totally agitated from the previous night's antics. His heart was racing, his emotions manic, but he had to focus. Today was it. Casting decided for the semester, and he couldn't let one stupid night of bullshit with Sam ruin it. He had every reason to be confident. He told himself over and over on the train on his way to school. His work had been well received last year. He managed to book a couple of professional jobs over the break. He was nailing it, as they said. Lead parts should be his now. This should have been a cakewalk, but it felt wrong, sideways. His voice brittle and sharp, too loud like the clatter of dishes smashing on a tile floor. Not that the other students were faring any better. After Charlotte's piece, Graham had asked her if over the summer she'd lost her mind. The earlier sessions had gone much better, still hopped up on coffee and indignation, but it had been hours now, a grueling afternoon of criticism and questions, and his energy was sapped. He was exhausted and frustrated, a perfect recipe for self-doubt. This was their third and final monologue of the day, and Graham had ripped them all to pieces from the start, not letting people finish, calling out sloppy character work, vocal tics, unnatural movement, and that cardinal sin, over-emoting. Not working hard enough over the summer, he kept saying, forgetting everything we've taught you, we should keep you all locked up. Lucy gave him a thumbs up from the back corner, but he knew it was half-hearted. At least everyone else seemed to be screwing up too. Why did you choose Cloud Street, Ryan? Graham asked, his unwavering eye contact unnerving. Karen Flanagan, his second-year voice coach, looked mortified, focused her gaze on something far above his head. Was that sarcasm in Graham's voice? Boredom? Ryan could never figure out how to read him. Head instructor of the drama division, Graham could be your champion one moment, encouraging and complimentary, then seconds later rip you to shreds. No encouragement, no teaching moments, just brutal, bitter criticism. They'd all experienced it. First year hazing, someone had said, weeding out those who weren't ready to sacrifice absolutely everything for their craft. Of course it could be that he just sucked, as he sometimes secretly suspected, and that they'd only let him in to cash his double-digit international tuition check, with no intention of really making an actor out of him. But he was being paranoid. Stop. He pushed the lack of sleep out of his head, buried his worries about Sam, and grasped a moment of clarity. His juice-spotted makeshift bandages now made him cringe. Just add a broom handle for a sword and he could be a 10-year-old playing pirates. Why had he chosen it? It felt like a loaded question, to be honest. He'd never even heard of Cloud Street before his web search for Australian monologues began a few weeks back, when they'd all gotten the audition schedule email. He had barely heard of Tim Winton, but he wanted to show them he was aware of Australian dramatic literature, that he wasn't just some cocky American who thought everything was David Mamet and Tennessee Williams. He'd stumbled onto it and read it in an afternoon. It was a rip-roaring play, drowning, dismemberment, alcoholism, poverty, adultery, reconciliation, gripping stuff, but the answer that answer wasn't gonna fly, was it? What was he supposed to say? He didn't want to sound like a shallow soap opera fan. What was the smart answer? He punted. Well, I chose it because the character's incredibly complex, full of agony and regret for the results of a life lived without true purpose. Quintessentially Australian, of course, but the play is universal in the way it dissects working class pain. He realized he sounded ridiculous and barely whispered out, "I'm suffering," before falling silent. He met Graham's gaze with all the manufactured confidence he could muster. Don't let him break you. Graham clicked his pen 3 times, his expression blank. Good God, Ryan, did you read that on the Australian Theatre Guild website? Ryan's face burned. That was exactly where he had read it. Stop there with that. How are we doing on time? All right. We're good. Oh, I need to take a drink, don't I? Thanks, Lynn. Do I sound hoarse? All right. Long chug here. I've got Dayquil in the other room too, so I have to run off and maybe grab another slug of that. All right. How are we doing? Okay, I'm going to read one little snippet of the novel, and I'm going to go on to some newer stuff. Fair enough? Okay. So this is, spoiler, this is a few chapters in. Sam, it's hinted at in that first chapter, Sam's a raging drunk, the character of Sam. Hits some legal trouble, and to get ahead of the court charges, he is showing up at AA meetings to get like a paper signed to show that he's attended. All right. Dwarfed by the nondescript glass and steel towers of Bondi Junction, the little brown church on Adelaide Street seemed lost, a remnant of another era. Its 100-year-old sandstone facade, pockmarked and faded from decades of exposure to tropical storms and blinding Australian sunshine. Sam had caught the train from the Cross and jogged the 10 blocks from the station, worried about being late, cars whizzing above his head along the Sid Heinfeld bypass. Overheated and out of breath, he stepped across the street and leaned against an overgrown fig tree, assessing, his once pristine polo shirt splotchy with sweat. Unpleasant errand aside, he loved this neighborhood. His first apartment out of uni had been just a few streets over in one of the worst, most decrepit units in a row of seriously dodgy old terrace houses, full of surfy students and palms on gap year from Oxford or whatever. A compromise for the lot of them, not beachside, but a reasonable walk down Bondi Road whenever they wanted to surf, and near enough to the train to get to work quickly at their underpaying desk jobs in the CBD if hangovers had them running late. The main draw, of course, had been the price. The grotty old thing was far cheaper than any of the increasingly posh reno jobs along Bondi's main surfing drag, and none of them could see giving up partying and getting serious enough about life to manage real rent. Of course, that entire row had been knocked down now to make way for a new gym, a new mall, a 20-story apartment tower with a rooftop pool. He'd lost touch with all of them except Luke. Had they sold out, gotten their shit together and moved up in the world? Or kept it real and followed the ever-dwindling supply of cheap surfing flats out to Maroubra, Cronulla? It didn't matter, life moved forward. There were AA meetings closer to home, of course. Meetings all over the city, according to the website. But he didn't want to run into anyone he knew and have to explain why he was ducking into a church on a Friday evening when he should be out enjoying himself. What would he do? Tell them some lie about Bible study? No one would believe him. Anyone with eyes and half a brain would suss out it was from one of these god-awful meetings. At least there were gay-specific meetings. As long as he had to sit and listen to people moan and groan about their sad lives, there may as well be the possibility of getting laid. This one was a bit out of the way. Bondi Junction, not a conspicuously gay spot, while the rest were smack in the middle of Darla or Surrey Hills, high risk of being seen. So spot chosen, he picked out a tight-fitting polo shirt that showed off his biceps and jumped on the train at King's Cross. He watched as a few people wandered into the church, fuming at himself for being so stupid that he had to be here. Get to as many meetings as you can, his solicitor had told him. Take a pocket diary with you and get them to sign on the days you attend. It'll look better to court. Addressing this issue before you're ordered to. Show them you're remorseful. He picked up a diary at the newsagent next to the station and he pulled it out of his pocket now. Crumpled the cellophane wrapper into the pocket, then bent the spine to loosen the pages. He hadn't even been that drunk, or at least not by his standards. He'd blown a .14, almost 3 times the legal limit, the cop had told him. Sure, he'd intended to stay sober that night, but he'd been far worse on other nights. All this hoopla seemed a bit ridiculous, and with these new stricter laws, 1 beer put you over the limit. He hadn't hit anyone, had he? Made it straight home if he'd just taken a different route. The jail is far too crowded with weekend warriors to make room for a regular blood with no police record. The cop's words. So he'd been let go after initial booking and walked home from the police center, stumbling along the bottle and paper-strewn streets of Surrey Hills, just as the sun was coming up. He chucked his clothes and collapsed on his bed, feeling filthy and sick, then slept through the entire day, only stirring and stumbling to the window as the sun went down across Elizabeth Bay. He'd wept quietly, but only for a moment, pushing it back. He would fix things. The following Wednesday, he had received a letter apprising him of his court date and an advisory that his license was disqualified for the next 3 months, pending intervention by his legal counsel or the results of his hearing in 6 weeks' time. He also received the towing and storage bill for his car and a request for prompt retrieval. The cost stood at $700 with increasing fees the longer he left the car. He didn't have the money, so he'd rung Belinda and feigned a breezy ease with her, talking about the weather and the world before finally telling her what had happened and asking for her credit card number. He played it as a boys' night out. Funny story, can you believe it? Can't believe I'm having to use the call me first rule. He assured her a commission check was on the way, so it would only be a matter of days before he paid her back. Just a bit of a tight spot at the moment. She tutted a bit, her Byron Bay indignant social justice warrior persona kicking into high gear, had gone on about psychological trauma, the unfairness of it all, and of course, she'd loaned him the money. Asked if he needed anything, if she should come down, stay with him while he healed. He'd assure her he wasn't traumatized, just hungover. As she signed off, she said, "Be careful, Sam, don't let this shame you. The legal system only exists to oppress the weak and to make money. Fuck the police." Yeah, fuck the police, he'd agreed, his indignation rising at her encouragement. Can a bloke have a few drinks on a Saturday night? I didn't hit anyone, didn't damage any property, right? Fuck them. But they were cracking down with the new laws, making examples of people, his solicitor had said. So he'd better look suitably penitent, which meant these meetings. Basically, he was fucked. All right, that's all I'll do from the novel. I don't want to give away too much, right? Okay, all right, so like I said, I've been working on a bit. So right now, Sam seems like a really awful, shitty guy, right? Don't worry. He's gonna be okay. And Ryan's gonna be okay. I shouldn't tell you any of this. You should read it and find out. Okay, so the novel that I'm working at now it's 5 years later. The benefit of not naming a year in the first book, this lets you like have the sequel be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, whatever you want to do. And Sam, so we learned in the first book, Sam's father is a very well recognized Australian architect. Sam started in architecture school and flunked out because he was drinking and took the consolation prize of becoming a realtor. Apparently this is very common with people who flame out of architecture school. So That didn't work out, lost his job, etc. Anyway, he's gotten sober. He's working sober. He went back to school, he's finished his architecture degree, he went back to Western Australia to do this, and now, sort of to set things right, prove a point, show people that he can actually live differently and be a different person, he's sort of gotten a job in Sydney, moved back, and he's gonna prove that he's not the same old fuck up he used to be. And that's where we find him at the beginning of this novel. And Belinda, who was mentioned earlier, that's his sister, they are renting a flat together, which is probably really ill-advised. Okay. And this is you gotta give me the pass for sheet for stress, maybe second draft. The flat was unremarkable but clean. Excellent price considering how close to the beach it was. They compromised a bit. His sister had wanted the super modern unit with ocean views just behind the Coogee Pavilion. Sam had balked at the price and argued for something cheaper, something closer to better transport. They compromised on a third level, 2-bedroom in a traditional 50s brick and tile for $100 less a week. 10 minutes walk to the beach, 10 minutes to the roundabout light rail in the other direction. Ancient but huge kitchen, 1 bath. Tiny balcony with just enough space for 2 chairs and a coffee table and a glimpse of Coogee Bay if you stood on tiptoe, which he was doing right now, yearning to be in the water again. He's a surfer, by the way, also. He'd had precious little time to surf during school. That first year back in Margaret River, he'd gone down to the beach every Saturday. It felt different out in the waves without that usual weekend burning hangover, without that sense of dread over what he might or might not have done the night before. Clean, deep breaths, sore muscles from the intense workout of it. Made him feel alive again, and he'd reveled in it until Aunt Kate had told him it was time to get serious about work. If she was going to make accommodation for his weekday classes, then Saturdays were to be spent in the office. He bristled at first. So fucking unfair, right? Hadn't he just gotten sober and pulled his shit together? Wasn't he back to school now to make things right? He'd never borrowed much from Aunt Kate after all. Shouldn't she be a bit more understanding? But Robert had reminded him she was giving him room and board and a job with flexible hours that paid enough to cover his uni fees and basic expenses and kept him working with family and friends. Yeah, he'd said, fair is fair, figuring he'd just play it off and sneak in the days when he could. But Robert had pulled him up short. Not not figure a way around it, not see how you can do the bare minimum. That sounds like a spoiled young man I once met who I'd hoped had done some growing up. Wake up to yourself. And he was right, of course. Robert was always right. Sam had wondered when or if he was ever going to get his own damn moral compass back. But he had, slowly. Progress had come. His body had gotten better first, waking up earlier in the morning, breathing easier, feeling his muscles work again, flexible and ready to move in ways he had forgotten were even possible. Before studying, he would jog on the beach in the early morning light, pushing himself, straining his calves as he kicked across the cool sand, not yet warmed by full sunlight, until his lungs were on fire, then throwing himself into the freezing water before he let himself collapse, pushing through the breakers, holding it in, staying underwater longer than he had ever been able to before, feeling the blood surge through his lungs, his heart, his gut, his shoulders, down to his feet and up to his head, surfacing to see the brilliant blue sky and scattered clouds over the Indian Ocean, fire in his lungs, but good fire, fire of rebirth. His brain had followed a little more slowly. The first couple of months back at work, he'd still felt a fog around the simplest concepts, forgotten to place a couple of orders, miscalculated a few crucial numbers. Aunt Kate had been firm and harsh. 3 chances, Sam, just like any employee, but I will not keep you on if you make fireable mistakes. He'd gotten defensive at first, but he'd listened and focused, and he kept trying, and it had come. The studying as well. And doing the right thing, committing to responsibility, it had come, even if he bristled at it still. But his heart, that had come last, and some days he wondered if it had really come back at all. Melancholy would hit him out of nowhere, catching him off guard, freezing him up. A random flash of something regrettable he'd said, some opportunity he'd let slip by, or a sudden memory of something vulgar he'd done in a drunken blackout could spiral him into shame for hours. He'd prayed more than once that as his body healed, his memory wouldn't. He didn't know if he could face it, but it had healed quickly. Everything had, coming back stronger and harder than he was perhaps ready for. One morning that first semester, he had sat at the bus stop going to town and quietly wept for 20 minutes. A young girl in school uniform, maybe 16, hair in perfect plaits, asked him if he was all right and offered him a Diet Coke from her book bag. He'd gratefully taken it, and she had patted his arm while he drank it. He'd watched her get on the schoolies bus while he waited for the often late twice-a-day beach bus. She turned and waved, "See you tomorrow," and he realized he'd seen her every day since he'd started back, that he knew her, that people could be kind. And now, standing on this tiny balcony, looking over the rooftops of workers' cottages and apartment blocks toward the shops of Coogee Bay Road, he felt like this could work, this could be home. He turned back to the lounge room, empty except for the portable fan the landlord had supplied, no aircon in their price range. And you'll notice the bathroom is between the bedrooms, so you have a sound barrier, the agent waved an arm toward the hallway. Well, that'll be good with his snoring, Belinda said. You'd be surprised how quickly the snoring cleared up once I quit drinking, he whispered to Belinda. The agent had wandered into the kitchen and was saying something about the original gas cooktop. Oh, Belinda asked, her tone cynical. Guess when your body doesn't have to fight so hard to stay alive, your breathing goes easier. Sam, that's morbid. It's true. And it's awful. I'm just glad you're doing better now. He said nothing, moved toward the sound of the agent's voice. You probably noticed the green grocer in the ground floor unit saves you from running up the street to Kohl's on a late night. I also noticed the dodgy-looking chicken shop across the street with the burnout sign and the all-night convenience store with that gang of skateboarders huddled around the door, he whispered to Lynn. But you're a night owl anyway, she said, so it's perfect. We'll be best mates with those little punks by next week. Oh, come on, give me a little credit here, he said, running his finger along the kitchen bench top. It was spotlessly clean. I have, she said, but let's not pretend you're all of a sudden a saint. Fair enough, he said. They signed the lease that afternoon. Right. I think we'll stop there with the book. Alrighty, so I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna do a little bit, these are flash pieces of CNF. That like I said, I stumbled into CNF. I had to teach it, so I was like, hey, I'm gonna teach it. I'm gonna learn how to write it myself. So I taught myself while I was teaching them. That's kind of fun. You'll get to do that if you get these speaking jobs. All right, so these are about my father. My father died when I was 19 years old, and he died when I was in a really miserable place in my life. And we never got to have that father-son moment when you're getting out of these things, if you do get out of these things. And well, I'll just let the pieces speak for themselves. Salina, this was the one. It was just in. This was the one in Bull, and then Heber came out right afterward in Los Angeles Review, and I thought, oh, they're paired. I probably should have said them in the same journal, but you don't think of these things at the time. All right, so this is the first piece. It's called Salina. They're both named after towns. This is Salina, Kansas. That day, I was driving across Kansas, flat and green and empty, the freeway mathematically straight. The few trees I could see, elms and oaks clustered around farmhouses, scraggly and stooped, windbreaks clinging to the soil in a place they didn't belong. I'd stayed in Arkansas the night before, a college town in a dry county. From the window of my third-floor hotel room, I could see the stumpy gray tower of a nuclear reactor, a giant's ottoman surrounded by lush green forest, and I imagined teenagers dancing around a bonfire in the woods, drinking contraband whiskey, reveling in their small act of rebellion while soaking in poison. And 12 hours later, as the pain in my lower back went from dull to thumping, I pulled off the freeway in Nowhere, Kansas, to a cluster of new construction in the middle of a cornfield. The roadside attractions of Holiday Inn, McDonald's, Flying J, their parking lot still roped off to let the asphalt set. I booked a room and took a shower in a harshly lit bathroom that still smelled of fresh paint and drywall. The town was a mile off, a cluster of short buildings sticking up from a dense green circle of trees, more than I'd seen in one place since leaving Arkansas. I scrolled through restaurant descriptions trying to find something local, looking at addresses, and I realized I had landed in my father's hometown. I was good with maps, always knew where I was a day before I got there, but it had tricked me. He had rarely spoken of Salina, said they'd been poor and that was that. But once he told us that his mother, long dead from a drunk driving accident, had been considered the most beautiful woman in Kansas. That night, they had been out drinking, drunk and giddy, they had hit another car head on, and she had taken flight in cocktail dress and pearls, landing on damp lawn, her neck broken. And the town had frozen in that moment. The brew pub I chose was in a converted bank, its entrance defended by a carved granite American eagle atop Doric columns, a copperhead snake squirming in its talons, the ceiling still covered with WPA murals of square-jawed farmers bushling corn. After dinner, I walked through the mostly abandoned downtown onto perfectly straight avenues lined with Victorians and Cape Cods, large, old, run down. Mom had told us Dad lived in an apartment up the back stairs at one of the big houses, that his grandmother had been the housekeeper, had taken them in after the accident, 3 boys and her in 2 rooms. Dad had told her to keep it to herself and gone to sit in the garage. The next week, she found him on the floor in my sister's room, dead of a heart attack. I walked further, light going dim now, past gray peaked roofs, solid oak doors, and leaded glass, elm and walnut trees, until I saw it. A single light over the garage at the back, a door at the top of a shaky-looking staircase, brown paint with blue trim, 2 small windows, a flower box, nothing blooming. No way of knowing, except I knew. I knew because he whispered it in my ear. And I knew all of it in that moment. Blankets pulled from freezing children in winter, grocery money spent on booze, a steaming iron used as a weapon leaving a jagged scar across her neck, a place of horror and pain and violence. And I knew that he had found the Mormons and joined them because they didn't drink, because they loved God and loved their children and believed in forgiveness and kindness, yes, but most of all, because they didn't drink. Thank God they didn't drink. I parked at the entrance to the still barricaded parking lot and walked up to the motel, weeping quietly for everything he'd lost, everything he'd sacrificed for us. I slept for a few hours, then packed and left before sunrise, before I had to see it in daylight. All right. And then, this is a week later. Heber, this is a small town in Utah. I've been to Park City, skiing in Park City. That's right next to All right. A narrow winding creek cuts through flat plains of sagebrush. Slender elms line the banks beneath granite cliffs, still topped with snow in summer. The term American Alps gets thrown around about this place, but never feels right. The western desert too near, sand and scrub too present to allow any real European sensibility to take hold. Still, Heber has silly homages to Switzerland here and there. A giant cuckoo clock fronts a pockmarked faux chalet advertising schnitzel and strudel. A mini Matterhorn, wire mesh pushing through torn plaster, tops a roadside motel. The original architecture of the town is more solid. Red sandstone churches and halls, brick and timber houses, 2 and 3 stories, some modest, some massive. The biggest and grandest built by my great-great-grandfather, Abram Hatch. This house, now a bank, a stately main branch, where members of the family are given the courtesy of free access to the upstairs rooms, still furnished with the original credenzas, cabinets, and 4-poster beds of box elder and mahogany. A few blocks away, the city cemetery, dabbed with granite spires and crypts, sits directly under Mount Timpanogos, the second highest peak of the Wasatch Range, shaded by Utah pine. I park along the narrow drive just past the iron gates. I am here to complete an errand, a task I've been set by my sponsor. The 9th step in recovery is to make direct amends to those we have harmed, and here is where I will speak to my father. It feels too conveniently dramatic to claim that my last words to my father were, "I hate you," but they almost were. I was 19 and already a drunk, down for the weekend from college, and my dad picked me up at the bus terminal. The old arguments had revved up moments after he started the car. My grades, my drinking, my rejection of the church, a cult, I said, a refuge for the stupid and cowardly. He had stopped arguing, driven on in silence. I stomped straight into my room from the garage. A week later, my mother found him sprawled on the floor in my sister's bedroom, dead of a heart attack. I hadn't been able to process it then, had gotten right back to the business of drinking myself into academic suspension, followed quickly by expulsion. But I meant to do something about it now, meant it wholeheartedly, address the past, take responsibility. On advice, I had written a letter, and I walked between the headstones to where he lay, buried near some second cousins I hadn't known. His headstone flat because of new laws restricting structure height, this section treeless because of a new commitment to respecting the natural landscape. I pulled the letter, quarter folded, from my back pocket. "I know I have harmed you," I started, "that what I did was wrong," or some semblance of those amends speeches I'd heard in television and movies, the gorgeous Hollywood actor or actress earnestly expressing the addict's desire to change. But instead of connecting to his spirit, the words fell to the ground, dull, thumping, like a mallet hitting wood. This was supposed to be transformative, but I felt nothing. I felt stupid, in fact. I walked away from the grave into the older part of the cemetery, toward massive pines and spires, the tombstones of another time. Janice and Ken Crosby, grandparents who I had loved so dearly, their shared monument at a tilt, tree roots beginning their work. Doc Hyde's roughly chiseled tombstone next to all his 13 children and their spouses, and the towering granite obelisk of Abram Hatch, 12 feet tall, just wide enough to hold a body, as my sister had been sure it had when we were younger. And I knew that the past was done. I knew that I belonged, that we both belonged here as part of something bigger than either one of us. Bigger than the town, bigger than these mountains. My family by blood, his by marriage, but ours together. The only words I needed then were thank you. All right, it's 8 o'clock. How are we doing? I think we can do it. I did, what did Mary Merrill say that? Did I read enough? Okay. All right, so I'm happy to take questions and happy to read more. Anybody? Sure.
You said in the crowd talk, I believe that your editor did not want you to do a sequel.
Yes.
Why? What's wrong with this?
There was some snobbery about like literary sequels, like sequels are for Hulu and Netflix, and I was like, okay, bring it on. Do you know anybody at Hulu? Let's go. Yeah, in fact, a novel that I really love, an Australian writer that I know, his book just got turned into a miniseries. It's not playing up here, it's on Australian TV. I was like, damn it, I was like, I hate you, and that's like, okay, congratulations, Holden. But like, I'm like, damn, come on, yeah.
Give it like 2 years.
What's
Give
that?
it like 2 years. They'll do an American adaptation.
That's that, right? And it won't be quite as good, but yeah. Yeah, they did that with The Slap. Did anyone watch The Slap when they did that? This was originally an Australian series, and then they remade it in America, and they used one of the same actors in the same role from Australia and recast everybody else. It was like, how crazy of an experience would that have been for her, right? She played it in Melbourne as an Australian in the first movie, and then played it as an American in New York in the second. Same actress, same role. Gifted woman, by the way. She was good. All right. I'm gonna grab my glasses and actually see you guys now. Yeah, hi.
Whether it was assigned or like leisure reading, what author would you say has most informed your writing?
Good Lord. So many. Who affects like pleasure or assigned? So I'm gonna blank. So I'm thinking of the novel. Jean Reese is who I'm thinking of right now. Yeah. So after leaving Mackenzie, Mr. Mackenzie taught me a lot about so much about setting. Like that woman nails it. I fondly harken back to like the Tales of the City novels by Emerson Maupin, like because for pacing, right? I love because they're so breezy, fast, rat-a-tat-tat, sharp. I promise you, I actually write a lot of dialogue. I didn't read any of the dialogue sections, and we talked about that earlier. This was the stuff that happened after the dialogue. This is like the interiority that and also my editors like, you need more interiority. So it's like, here it is. So, but I like those books for that. I love really good detective fiction. I think because I like trying to I like tension and I like suspense, even if it's not about a crime. I still think that that's really important in plot. So I read detective fiction. I'm trying to think what else would I like. And I love Hemingway. Short stories, not the novels. Oh God. Yeah. What did Dorothy Parker say? She said when she did her famous review of A Farewell to Arms, she said, Ernest Hemingway is our greatest living short story writer. He is, however, not our greatest living novelist. But like I like being reminded that you can do so much with a little, right? So I think that yeah. Somebody else.
Studied Jean Reese with Angela Ball.
Did I study Jean? No, I studied Jean Reese with Steve Bartholomew. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's somebody else. Yeah. I do read modern people. Like names aren't coming. Yeah. Holden Shepherd, the guy who does it. He's fantastic. Actually, the guy who got the miniseries. Holden Shepherd's really good. All right. What else? Like you're boring old man sitting. All right. I'm done. Yes.
In the craft talk this afternoon, you talked about like distancing yourself from the truth when writing fiction.
Yes.
So how did you like re-come to terms with truth when writing scene that?
So that felt so vulnerable when I did that, right? Like, and I was even conscious of it when I was reading it. I was like, oh, that is like, I'm not pretending that's another character, right? So yeah, I mean, it is very different because, you know, like I said, with the character of Ryan is like loosely based on me, but I changed really fundamental things about him on the advice of my teacher. It's like that's the best way to step away from like getting too attached to the truth in fiction and just telling a good story. But then, yeah, the CNF, I'm like, well, I hope my life's interesting because like this was a moment for me. But like it is, you feel very vulnerable, so you just have to kind of ask yourself that question, like, am I ready to share this? Because when you're writing it, it feels like you don't stop to think, okay, the goal is that other people are gonna read this, right? So, yeah, I had to do a lot of peacemaking with it, absolutely, yeah. And in fact, gosh, God bless, my mother passed away last year. When I started writing some things about the family, she was like, can you please change your name? I was like, no, sorry. Yeah.
After you finish a sequel, what will your process be of revising it and getting it ready for publication?
The process will be read, like first of all, let it sit, right? You gotta let it sit, because I think when you get wrapped up in the process, I think you start thinking everything sucks, and then you start changing everything, and the fact is it doesn't. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier in the craft talk, right? Give it some breathing room, set it away, like metaphorically put it in a drawer, but like put it in the cloud, right? Like leave it, and then come back to it. And what I do first before I revise anything is I read the whole thing. That's what I did with this, like before I would do the revisions. I just like read the whole book, sit with it, see how it grabs you. Because it's so tempting to like start fussing with stuff, and then like, oh, but I've got to say that, and then you forgot that you actually say that 3 pages later, or 10 pages later, or what have you. And I actually caught myself doing that with the first novel, so I had to stop and like reconsider that process. Yeah.
How far are you into the sequel?
I've got lots of pages. Yeah, there are pages that exist. Yeah. Again, back to that whole fragment thing that I'm doing. I'm just fragmenting it. I'm like, this might happen. Maybe he'll do this. Maybe he won't. Like, and I write stuff that doesn't end up. Like, I write a lot of stuff that I don't end up using because I'm just seeing what's going to happen. Yeah. Fair enough. Alrighty, thanks everybody.
Everyone gets a turn. So Kevin gets a turn.
There's a few things I agree.
I just want to say thanks for coming. Great reading. There are books for sale in back. I'm sure you're going to sign some.
I'm happy to.
Right? And that's it.
What's the next reading? I forget. It's the graduate reading.
All right, the graduate reading is May 9th. Endless
There's water in the back. I need to say which one.
Yeah, it's like glossy cover. You're like, no.
So I'm like, this is not something, I'm either reading the excerpt or this is reading the excerpt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Over your house, and it's like,
That's one of the things I think we got your name and orientation. The library. The way I can just go to make one if they're not ready for it.
so we'll see you either way.
Yeah, very nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, we've got some of our, yeah, we don't have any specific high schools, but dual enrollment students were like, yeah, one of our dual enrollment,
Not with the subway necessarily, but just like walking down the street, we see you got the
yeah, okay.